Look closely at what lies within your control and what does not. Your legacy isn't shaped by the chaos of the world, but by how you choose to respond to it. These words from Marcus Aurelius aren't just ancient wisdom, they're a blueprint for radical transformation. Think about it, every decision, every setback, every moment of doubt is an opportunity to forge something lasting, something that outlives you. But here's the question that stops most people cold. What legacy will your actions leave? Not the legacy you hope for, not the one you daydream about, but the one you're actually building right now, through the choices you make when no one's watching. That's the power Stoicism taps into. It's not about stiff upper lips or passive acceptance. It's about wielding timeless principles like a blacksmith's hammer, shaping your character with intention. Picture this: 2,000 years ago, Roman emperors enslaved philosophers, and everyday citizens used these same tools to navigate upheaval, loss, and uncertainty, and their insights are just as urgent today. Because here's the truth: legacy isn't reserved for the famous or the fortunate. It's built in the quiet moments when you choose discipline over distraction, courage over comfort, purpose over procrastination. This video isn't just about understanding Stoicism, it's about living it. We'll break down the core tenets that turn philosophy into action, the discipline of perception, the art of separating what you can control from what you can't, and the relentless focus on virtue as your compass. These aren't abstract ideas, they're the same principles that guided figures like Epictetus, who rose from slavery to become one of history's most influential teachers, or Seneca, who transformed exile into opportunity. Imagine applying that same mindset to your challenges, the setbacks at work, the relationships that test your patience, the self-doubt that whispers you're not enough. What changes when you start seeing obstacles as fuel? When you realize your legacy isn't about being remembered, but about who you become in the process? That's the journey we're starting today. By the end, you won't just know Stoic philosophy, you'll have the tools to rewrite your story, one unshakable choice at a time. Epictetus laid it out plainly: some things are within our power while others are not. That single idea is the bedrock of every great legacy, because you can't build something enduring if you're exhausting yourself fighting battles you were never meant to win. Picture a typical workday: the traffic jam that makes you late, the last-minute changes from your boss, the co-worker who takes credit for your ideas. None of that is within your control, but your reaction, that's your domain entirely. Stoicism isn't about ignoring those frustrations, it's about recognizing where your real power lies. Think of it like sailing. You can't command the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Ancient ship captains didn't waste energy cursing storms, they focused on navigating through them. That's the mindset shift that changes everything. Here's where most people stumble: they confuse influence with control. You might influence a negotiation or a relationship, but you don't control the outcome. The moment you tie your peace to results you can't guarantee, you hand over your power. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this better than anyone. He wrote, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." That's how a man with no worldly freedom became one of history's greatest teachers, by mastering what he could control: his mind, his values, his actions. Try this today. Grab a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list everything currently stressing you: deadlines, other people's opinions, global events. On the other, write the single word response. That blank space, that's where your legacy gets built. Every time you redirect energy from the left column to the right, you're not just practicing Stoicism, you're chiseling your character into something unshakable. Because here's the secret: legends aren't made by perfect circumstances. They're forged by ordinary people who stopped waiting for the world to change and started changing what they could themselves. Seneca put it bluntly: the obstacle is the way. Not a barrier, not a detour, the path itself. That shift in perspective transforms every challenge from something you endure into something you use. Consider Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood against Julius Caesar's tyranny. When his cause was lost, when his allies had fled, he didn't collapse in despair. He turned his final moments into a lesson on integrity, studying philosophy before taking his own life, not out of defeat, but as a final act of defiance. His enemies won the battle, but Cato's legacy outlasted them all. Now, fast forward to today. That job rejection, the project that fell apart, the criticism that stung, what if those weren't setbacks but raw material? The Stoics didn't just tolerate hardship, they leveraged it. A ship's timbers are tested by storms, not calm seas. Your character works the same way. Think of a blacksmith forging a blade. The hammer strikes aren't destroying the metal, they're shaping it. Every blow removes impurities, aligns the structure, and creates an edge that can cut through resistance. That's precisely what obstacles do for you. The key difference between frustration and fuel isn't the event itself, it's the meaning you assign to it. When Seneca was exiled to Corsica, a punishment meant to break him, he didn't waste years pleading for mercy. He wrote letters that became timeless works of philosophy, trained his mind like an athlete, and returned more influential than ever. Exile didn't weaken him, it sharpened him. Now bring this home. What's one recent obstacle you faced? A missed promotion, a strained relationship, a personal failure? Write it down, then ask, how could this refine me if I let it? Not, why is this happening to me, but what can this reveal about my resilience, creativity, or priorities? Modern life bombards us with shortcuts, comfort, distraction, instant gratification. But the Stoics knew growth hides in the friction. A muscle only strengthens under tension. A mind only expands when pushed beyond its limits. The next time you hit resistance, pause. That's not life working against you, it's life training you. The obstacle isn't blocking your path, it's the path itself, and the way forward isn't around it but straight through. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections as if each day could be his last, not with fear but with fierce clarity. You could leave life right now, he reminded himself. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's the power of Memento Mori, not as morbid fixation, but as the ultimate lens for focus. History's most impactful lives share this thread. They treated time as finite fuel, not an endless resource. Take the Renaissance artist Michelangelo, who at 87, frail and nearing death, still chiseled marble with relentless passion. His assistants pleaded with him to rest. His response, I am still learning. Imagine standing at the edge of your own life, looking back. What unfinished work would haunt you? Not the projects you postponed for perfect conditions, but the bold moves you hesitated to make. The conversations left unspoken, the risks not taken, the potential untapped because comfort felt safer than courage. Stoics didn't avoid thoughts of death, they invited them. Seneca urged his students to live each day as if it were a complete life compressed into 24 hours. Not to rush, but to remove the non-essential. When Steve Jobs stood before Stanford's graduating class in 2005, his words echoed this exact principle. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. That speech came just a year after his cancer diagnosis. Mortality didn't paralyze him, it prioritized him. Here's the paradox most miss. Contemplating death doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. The Roman general Scipio Africanus kept a skull on his desk, not as a grim trophy, but as a daily prompt. Every decision was filtered through one question: does this merit the briefness of my time? Picture applying that same ruthless editing to your own life. How many trivial worries would vanish? How much bolder would your choices become? Procrastination thrives on the illusion of someday. Memento Mori shatters it. So try this tonight, not as an exercise in gloom, but as liberation. Write down 3 things you'd regret not doing if your time were sharply limited. Then circle the one you've been avoiding out of fear. That item, that's where your legacy begins. Because here's the truth no one tells you: death isn't waiting at the finish line. It's walking beside you, whispering, if not now, when? And the answer, the only one that matters, is spelled out in your next unpostponable action. The Stoics measured success not in wealth, victories, or applause, but in the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom to see reality clearly, courage to act despite fear, justice in all dealings, and temperance that reigns in excess. Imagine 2 entrepreneurs launching identical businesses. One obsesses over quarterly profits, cutting corners to inflate numbers. The other prioritizes fair wages, honest marketing, and sustainable growth. A year later, both might appear equally successful on paper, but the Stoic asks a different question: which business enriched the owner's character? Seneca warned, a man is as wretched as he has convinced himself to be. Chasing external validation guarantees misery because you're building on shifting sand. But cultivate virtue, that's an unshakable foundation. Consider a modern executive faced with a choice: approve a lucrative deal requiring small ethical compromises, or reject it and risk shareholder fury. Society applauds the first path as pragmatic. Stoicism calls it theft, stealing from your own integrity to pay temporary debts. When the Roman philosopher Musonius Rufus was exiled to a barren island, his students begged him to plead for mercy. His response: if I must choose between exile and dishonor, send me farther. That's virtue in action, treating principles as non-negotiable even when it costs. Here's where the philosophy gets counterintuitive. Stoics weren't against outcomes, they simply recognized them as unreliable scorecards. A general could execute a flawless battle plan and still lose due to a sudden storm. Does that make him less virtuous? Epictetus argued no. The good lies in the effort, not the result. This flips modern hustle culture on its head. Instead of asking, did I hit my targets? The Stoic asks, did I act with discipline? Did I treat others fairly? Did fear dictate my choices? Try this audit today. Pinpoint one area where you've prioritized convenience over character. Maybe it's skipping the gym because one day won't matter, or staying silent when a colleague takes credit for your work. Now replay that moment through the lens of the 4 virtues. What would wisdom reveal about your rationalizations? Where did courage falter? How might justice or temperance have redirected you? Virtue isn't about grand, theatrical sacrifices. It's the sum of small, unseen choices. Like a sculptor smoothing marble, every ethical decision chips away at the raw block of your potential, revealing the masterpiece beneath. Seneca's letters capture this perfectly. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Society will always dangle shortcuts: the inflated resume, the white lie to avoid conflict, the extra drink to numb discomfort. But each compromise steals something far more valuable than the reward it brings: your trust in yourself. The Stoic path: let outcomes be what they may. Your job isn't to control the harvest, but to sow seeds worthy of your respect. Because when you stand at life's end, the question won't be, what did you achieve? But who did you become? And that answer is written daily, in ink no one can erase. The Stoics had a radical term for mastering runaway desires: apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but the art of untangling yourself from cravings that hijack your purpose. Picture a fisherman wrestling with a thrashing marlin. The harder he fights the line, the more exhausted he becomes. Apatheia is the moment he stops resisting and starts directing the energy. Epictetus, who watched his fellow slaves chase fleeting comforts while Rome crumbled around them, put it bluntly: freedom isn't secured by filling your pockets, but by emptying your wants. Today, we don't wear chains of iron. We forge them from likes, notifications, and the insatiable hunger for external approval. Social media didn't invent this weakness, it weaponized it. The ancient agora had its gossips and status seekers too, but where Romans battled distraction in marble forums, we fight it in infinite scroll. The dopamine hit from a viral post mirrors the fleeting high of a gambler's win. Both leave you craving another bet. Stoics would call this Apatheia, the raw impulses before they harden into full-blown addictions. Left unchecked, these cravings don't just waste time, they rewrite your ambitions. Ever notice how hours meant for deep work vanish into comparison spirals? That's not procrastination, it's desire hijacking your legacy. Here's the litmus test. Next time you feel the pull to check your phone during focused work, pause. That itch isn't neutral, it's a vote for who you're becoming. Epictetus trained his students to interrogate desires like suspicious travelers at the city gates. What do you promise? What will you truly deliver? Most crumble under scrutiny. The desire for fame promises immortality but delivers anxiety. The craving for convenience sells efficiency but steals self-reliance. Even positive aspirations like building wealth or influence turn toxic when they morph from tools into obsessions. Try this digital detox drill. For 1 week, delete all social apps before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m., not to punish yourself but to expose the void they're filling. At first, you'll fidget like a smoker without cigarettes. That discomfort. That's withdrawal from the addiction to being seen. But slowly, you'll notice something profound. The thoughts you've been drowning in noise resurface. The projects you abandoned for shallow validation regain their magnetism. This isn't about quitting technology, it's about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention, the raw material of legacy. Now the piercing question, what desire currently clouds your long-term vision? Is it the need to appear busy rather than produce meaning, the hunt for shortcuts that dilute your craft? Even noble goals, providing for family, gaining expertise, can become prisons when pursued without temperance. The Stoic remedy isn't deprivation but recalibration. Every morning, Seneca would ask himself, what in today's desires would I refuse if offered in exchange for my peace? That single question turns cravings from masters into servants. Because here's the truth, no algorithm will show you. The less you need from the world's fleeting validations, the more you can give to what outlasts you. Seneca practiced what he called Premeditatio Malorum, premeditation of evils, not to dwell on doom, but to disarm it. Every morning, he would visualize the worst possible outcomes, losing his wealth, his status, even his health. Then he'd ask himself, could I endure it? The answer always surprised him, because once you've walked through the fire in your mind, the real sparks lose their power to terrify. Modern psychology backs this. Navy SEAL use similar mental rehearsals before missions. They call it stress inoculation. But 2,000 years earlier, Stoics were already masters of this technique. Take a tech founder launching a groundbreaking app. The Stoic approach, before celebrating early traction, she spends an hour each week imagining catastrophic scenarios. Servers crashing on launch day, a key investor pulling out, a competitor copying her code. Then she drafts contingency plans for each. This isn't pessimism, it's strategic antifragility. When her worst-case scenario actually hits a data breach exposing user information, she doesn't panic. She's already rehearsed the response: transparent communication, free credit monitoring for affected customers, a public postmortem. The crisis becomes a reputation builder instead of a destroyer. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire plagued by wars and plagues, wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." Not to complain, but to preempt their sting. Imagine applying that same clarity to your own challenges, that difficult client who always derails meetings. Visualize their objections beforehand and craft responses rooted in patience rather than frustration, the job interview that makes your palms sweat. Rehearse answering the toughest questions with calm precision. Here's the practice. Pick one fear looming over you: public failure, financial instability, a relationship fracturing. Now channel Seneca. Write down 3 specific ways this adversity could strengthen you. Maybe losing a job forces you to finally freelance. A betrayal teaches you to trust your instincts. The Stoic twist: the worst outcomes often become the most instructive. Like a boxer training with weighted gloves, you're conditioning resilience before it's needed. The brilliance of Premeditatio Malorum lies in its dual effect. It reduces anxiety about the future while sharpening your ability to navigate chaos. Epictetus, who endured slavery and exile, put it plainly: what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. By confronting disasters in advance, you rewrite those judgments. The market crash isn't a catastrophe, it's a buying opportunity. The missed promotion isn't a dead end, it's a detour to something better suited. Try this tonight. Visualize your biggest professional or personal fear with brutal honesty. Now, imagine yourself 1 year after it happens. How have you adapted? What strengths emerged? That's the Stoic secret. Adversity doesn't define you, your preparation for it does. Because when you've already survived the storm in your mind, the real clouds lose their power to paralyze. Nietzsche gave the world a revolutionary idea borrowed from Stoic philosophy: amor fati, the unconditional love of fate. Not merely accepting what life throws at you, but embracing it like a sculptor embraces raw marble. This isn't passive resignation, it's active alchemy. Take the story of Paralympic sprinter Blake Leaper, born without lower legs. Society framed his condition as a limitation. He reframed it as propulsion. While others saw absence, he saw aerodynamic advantage: carbon fiber blades that made him faster than most able-bodied athletes. His disability wasn't an obstacle, it was his edge. That's amor fati in action, turning what appears to be a setback into the very thing that propels you forward. The Stoics whispered this truth centuries before Nietzsche branded it. Epictetus, a man who'd been crippled by a cruel master, wrote, "Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will." What sounds like consolation is actually a weapon. When life forced him into slavery, he didn't waste energy longing for freedom he couldn't have. He mined his chains for wisdom. By the time he was freed, he'd transformed his suffering into teachings that outlived emperors. That's the power of loving your fate. It doesn't change the event, but it changes you, and that changes everything. Here's where most misinterpret amor fati. Loving fate doesn't mean applauding injustice or ignoring pain. It means recognizing that even the bitterest lemon can be squeezed into lemonade if you're willing to do the squeezing. When a sudden injury ended violinist Adrian Anantawan's dream of becoming a concert soloist, he didn't abandon music. He pioneered techniques for playing with one arm. His adaptation didn't just restore his career, it expanded the art form itself. The world handed him what looked like a dead end. He built a bridge. Now apply this to your own life. What unexpected detour have you been resisting? A job loss that feels like failure might be the push toward entrepreneurship you needed. A broken relationship could be the space required to rediscover your own voice. Amor fati asks one radical question: how could this seeming curse actually be a disguised gift? Not in a vague spiritual sense, but in concrete, actionable terms. The startup that collapses teaches resilience no MBA program can match. The illness that forces you to slow down reveals priorities you've been sprinting past. Try this reframe today. Identify one current frustration, a delayed flight, a missed opportunity, a personal flaw. Now list 3 ways this misfortune could sharpen you. Maybe the delay gives you uninterrupted time to plan. The missed opportunity redirects you towards something better aligned. The flaw becomes a compass pointing to growth. Nietzsche wasn't prescribing blind optimism, he was offering a survival tool. My formula for greatness in a human being, he wrote, is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. That's the Stoic twist. Your legacy isn't built despite the twists of fate, but because of them. The oak tree grows strongest when winds bend it. The sword tempers hardest when the forge burns hottest. So ask yourself, what unexpected event can you not just accept but love today, not as a passive recipient but as an active co-creator of the meaning it holds? Because the secret history of every great life reads the same. What looked like the end was often the beginning in disguise. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal, not a public blog. His words weren't crafted for likes or retweets, but as tools to sharpen his own character. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be, he wrote. Be one. That's the Stoic approach to speech, measured, intentional, and ruthlessly focused on substance over noise. Picture the ancient Senate floor, where Cato the Younger would often sit in silence for hours, listening intently before rising to deliver a single, devastating point. His restraint wasn't weakness, it was a weapon. Today, we mistake volume for value, conflating constant communication with influence. But the Stoics understood, your words lose power when they're spent carelessly. Consider the modern workplace. How many meetings dissolve into circular debates because everyone rushes to speak and no one truly listens? Contrast that with the practice of Thracia, a first-century senator who made a habit of leaving gatherings early to avoid idle chatter. His peers mocked him until they noticed his decisions carried uncommon weight. Why? Because silence gave him space to distill clarity from chaos. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his Meditations: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That strength grows in the quiet. Here's the challenge: try a day of intentional silence, not monastic withdrawal, but strategic pause. Before speaking, ask, is this necessary? Is it kind? Does it serve a purpose? You'll quickly notice how much conversation is reflex, not reflection, filling airtime rather than advancing understanding. The Roman general Scipio Africanus trained himself to speak only when his words could improve the silence. Imagine applying that filter to your next email thread or social media post. How many would never be sent? Modern culture equates visibility with success, but history remembers those who mastered the art of strategic silence. Seneca warned of the crowd of words that dilute meaning, while Epictetus taught his students to let their actions speak first. When the philosopher Athenodorus was asked why he rarely addressed public assemblies, he replied, "The wise man speaks because he has something to say, the fool because he has to say something." That distinction separates leaders from loudmouths. Your turn. Pick one conversation today where you'll consciously listen more than you speak. Not passive hearing, but active engagement, reading between the lines, noticing unspoken tensions, resisting the urge to rehearse your response while others talk. You'll discover something profound. Silence isn't empty. It's the forge where discernment takes shape. As Marcus observed, the nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. In a world addicted to hot takes and knee-jerk reactions, your greatest leverage may lie in what you choose not to say. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journal to be read. He wrote for himself alone. That private honesty is what makes his meditations so powerful centuries later. Every night he turned the spotlight inward with relentless precision. Where did I falter today? When did fear override reason? What illusions still cloud my judgment? This wasn't self-criticism for its own sake. It was a blacksmith tempering his character stroke by stroke. Think of journaling as the ultimate legacy tool, not just recording events but shaping them in real time. The Roman emperor's reflections weren't about preserving his thoughts, they were about refining them. Imagine if history's most influential figures had left behind not just their accomplishments, but they're raw drafts, the doubts they overcame, the truths they wrestled with before dawn. That's the gift Stoic journaling offers, a way to edit your life in real time. Start with 3 questions every night, like a surgeon's checklist for the soul. First, what did I control today and where did I pretend otherwise? This exposes the energy drains, the time wasted fretting over traffic instead of preparing for the meeting it made you late for. Second, where did comfort masquerade as wisdom? Maybe you avoided a difficult conversation under the guise of choosing peace, when really you chose cowardice. Third, the most revealing, what legacy did today's choices build? Not the hypothetical one you'll get around to someday, but the one actually taking form hour by hour, decision by decision. Seneca took this further, dividing his journal into 2 columns. Lessons learned and debts owed, not monetary debts but moral ones. Had he been patient enough with his students? Had he repaid kindnesses in full? This daily audit wasn't about guilt, it was about alignment. When a ship's captain logs each mile, they're not just tracking progress, they're correcting course before the drift becomes irreparable. Your journal serves the same purpose. Try this tonight. Grab any notebook and pen 3 sentences, no more. 1 victory, however small, 1 failure, however uncomfortable, and 1 resolve for tomorrow. The brevity forces clarity. Like Marcus, you're not writing for posterity, you're distilling essence. Over weeks, patterns emerge, that recurring frustration with a colleague. Maybe it's not their incompetence, it's your perfectionism. That procrastinated project, not laziness but fear of falling short. Journaling strips away the noise, revealing the signal beneath. Epictetus, who taught primarily through questioning, would ask his students, "What are you becoming while you're busy doing?" Your nightly pages answer that. They're the merciless mirror that shows not just your face but your formation. Because legacy isn't built in grand announcements, it's etched in the quiet moments when you hold yourself accountable, 1 honest sentence at a time. Epictetus saw through the illusion 2,000 years before Instagram existed. If you wish to be admired, you must spend your life gazing into mirrors, both literal and figurative. Think about that phrase, gazing into mirrors. It's not just vanity, it's captivity. Every time you refresh a post to count likes or measure your worth by comments, you're handing over your self-assessment to strangers. Society didn't invent this trap, it just digitized it. The Roman elite craved applause in amphitheaters. We chase validation in algorithm-driven feeds. But here's what changes when you step back. External approval is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Take the painter who submitted her work to a prestigious gallery only to receive a form rejection. For weeks, she agonized over the judges' indifference until she realized their verdict didn't determine her art's value. It revealed their preferences. That's the Stoic distinction most miss. Feedback tells you about the giver, not your worth. Epictetus, who taught in a cramped Greek classroom while celebrities of his day chased fleeting fame, put it bluntly, if you tie your happiness to praise, you'll spend your life yanked by invisible leashes. Modern culture conflates visibility with significance, but history's most enduring contributions often went unrecognized in their time. Vincent van Gogh sold 1 painting in his lifetime. Franz Kafka asked his friend to burn his manuscripts. Their legacies weren't built on applause but on something far more resilient, alignment with an inner compass. When the sculptor Phidias was accused of embezzling gold for his statue of Athena, he didn't defend his reputation, he pointed to the artwork itself. The gold could be weighed, the artistry couldn't. That's detachment in action, creating not for the audience you have, but for the standards you hold. Here's your challenge today. Delete 1 social metric you obsess over. Follow accounts, LinkedIn endorsements, even the seen receipt on messages. Not as punishment, but as liberation. For 1 week, replace that outward glance with an inward question. Does this action align with my values, or am I performing for an invisible jury? At first, it'll feel like withdrawing from an addiction. That discomfort, that's your autonomy growing back. The Stoics didn't shun achievement, they redefined it. Seneca wrote letters not for publication but to clarify his own thinking. Marcus Aurelius composed meditations in the fog of war, not for posterity but for self-guidance. Their work outlasted empires precisely because it wasn't crafted for applause. Your legacy thrives in the same soil, the quiet space between what you do and who you are when no one's watching. So ask yourself, what would you create if metrics disappeared tomorrow? That answer is your true north, unshaken by algorithms, untouched by trends, and infinitely more enduring than any fleeting validation. Seneca once spent a week sleeping on the floor, not because his bed broke, but because he chose to. Set aside a certain number of days, he wrote, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare. That's voluntary discomfort in action, not punishment, but training. Picture a soldier running drills in full gear. The weight isn't there to slow him down. It's there so when the battle comes, his body remembers what lightness feels like. The Stoics didn't wait for hardship to find them. They sought it out, like blacksmiths tempering their own blades. Cold showers, skipped meals, rough blankets. These weren't acts of deprivation, but of preparation. Take cold exposure. Modern science confirms what the ancients knew. Brief, controlled stress, like icy water, triggers anti-inflammatory responses, sharpens focus, and builds grit. But the real power isn't in the shiver. It's in the moment your brain screams, stop, and you choose to continue. That split-second decision to endure rewires your relationship with discomfort. Suddenly, the snoozed alarm, the extra dessert, the avoided difficult conversation, all those tiny surrenders stand exposed as habits of avoidance rather than choices of freedom. Fasting works the same way. When Epictetus advised eating only what's necessary, he wasn't prescribing austerity. He was teaching discernment. Go 24 hours without food, and you'll discover something startling. Hunger comes in waves, not constants. The gnawing stomach isn't an emergency, it's a messenger. That meeting you thought you couldn't handle without breakfast, you'll navigate it with unexpected clarity. Because voluntary hunger reveals how much of your need for comfort is just noise, a learned reflex, not a true limit. Here's the challenge at the heart of this practice. For one day, strip away one habitual comfort. Skip the midday coffee, walk instead of drive, turn off notifications, not as an endurance test but as a spotlight. What emotions arise when the crutch is gone? Anxiety, boredom, irritation, those aren't flaws, they're signposts pointing to hidden dependencies. The executive who can't focus without caffeine, the student who panics without constant connection, they're not weak. They've just never tested their baseline. Voluntary discomfort isn't about proving toughness, it's about reclaiming autonomy. The entrepreneur who intentionally takes the bus during a strike isn't slumming. She's reminding herself that luxury is optional, not essential. The writer who drafts longhand in a park isn't being quaint. He's breaking the illusion that creativity requires perfect conditions. Every comfort you choose to remove becomes a thread you're no longer tethered by. Seneca warned of the danger hidden in ease. It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more. That craving doesn't just drain wallets, it leaks resilience. The Roman general Scipio Africanus famously ate the same rations as his lowest-ranking soldiers during campaigns. His troops saw sacrifice, he was practicing sovereignty. When you voluntarily step into discomfort, you're not losing convenience, you're gaining immunity. Immunity to the fear of lack, to the panic when plans unravel, to the delusion that happiness lies on the other side of perfect circumstances. Try this tonight as you reach for that extra pillow or second helping. Pause. That moment of wanting, that's the forge. Stay with it for just 5 breaths. You're not denying yourself pleasure, you're proving to yourself that pleasure doesn't own you. because the legacy you're building isn't measured in accumulated comforts, but in the depth of your freedom to walk away from them. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire at its peak, yet his private writings reveal a leader who saw power not as privilege but as responsibility. While other emperors built golden statues of themselves, he journaled about his flaws. While rivals schemed for more territory, he reminded himself, "The fruit of this life is good character and acts for the common good." That's the paradox of Stoic leadership. It gains authority by relinquishing ego. Picture a modern tech giant facing a data breach. The ego-driven CEO might blame hackers, downplay the damage, and shield executives. The Stoic leader, they call a press conference within hours, take full accountability, and outline concrete reparations, not because it's good PR, but because integrity demands it. Contrast this with the cult of the charismatic leader, the kind who needs constant applause, who frames every setback as someone else's fault, who confuses confidence with competence. Ancient Rome had plenty of those too. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Marcus built hospitals and fed the poor during plagues. One legacy crumbled within years, the other still guides leaders 2 millennia later. The difference isn't in their power, but in their purpose. Stoic leadership asks one radical question: are you serving your role, or is your role serving you? Take a Fortune 500 company navigating a product failure. The conventional playbook involves damage control, legal teams, spin doctors, selective transparency. Now imagine applying Marcus's morning meditation. Begin each day by telling yourself, "I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil." With that mindset, the CEO doesn't see angry customers as threats, but as teachers highlighting where the company strayed from its values. The recall isn't a disaster, it's a chance to recommit to quality. This philosophy transforms leadership from performance to practice. When the automotive executive Mary Barra faced General Motors' ignition switch scandal, she didn't just apologize, she overhauled the entire corporate culture, saying, "We will face our problems with integrity." That's Stoic leadership in action. Problems become curriculum, critics become coaches, and every crisis tests whether you're ruling your impulses before ruling others. So ask yourself, what would change if you led like a Stoic tomorrow? Not with grand gestures, but in the quiet moments. The meeting where you listen more than you speak, the email where you choose clarity over cleverness, the decision where you pick the right thing over the easy thing. Real influence doesn't come from titles or corner offices. It grows from the inside out when your inner citadel of principles is stronger than the need for external validation. Because the world has enough leaders who chase legacy, what it needs are those who let legacy chase them. Seneca's sharpest warning cuts deeper today than it did in ancient Rome. Life is long if you know how to use it. Notice he didn't say, if you fill it but use it. The average person lives around 30,000 days. Subtract sleep, chores, and obligations, and you're left with a handful of hours each day to build something that outlives you. Yet how many of those precious slivers vanish into the abyss of autoplay, endless scrolling, or minor anxieties we'll forget by morning? The Stoics didn't just value time, they treated it like a bleeding wound that demanded immediate pressure. Consider 2 colleagues in the same office. One spends her lunch break studying market trends for her side business. The other binges a new streaming series. Fast forward 5 years, one has launched a successful consultancy. The other can recite every plot twist of 20 shows but struggles to explain what she's personally created. Both had identical time reserves. The difference, one saw minutes as building blocks, the other treated them as disposable tissues. Here's where Seneca's on the shortness of life becomes brutal medicine. You act like mortals in all you fear, and like immortals in all you desire. We sweat over trivial conflicts, yet postpone meaningful work with the casualness of someone who believes they'll live forever. The tech founder who checks social media 20 times a day isn't just losing minutes, he's surrendering the compound interest of focused hours that could have scaled his vision. Try this audit for 1 week. Track every 30-minute block of your day in 2 columns: legacy time and leakage time. Legacy time includes actions with lasting ripple effects, skill building, deep work, nurturing key relationships. Leakage time, the black holes of distraction that leave no trace. Most recoil at the results not because they're shocking, but because they expose an uncomfortable truth. We donate our best hours to what matters least. The Stoic remedy isn't monastic deprivation, it's ruthless prioritization. When the Roman senator Cato refused to attend the theater, he wasn't rejecting pleasure, he was protecting his attention. Modern research confirms his intuition. Every time you switch tasks, it takes nearly 25 minutes to regain deep focus. That's why Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn to write in his journal, not because he lacked entertainment options, but because he knew the quiet hours were his only inviolable territory. Your turn. Identify one recurring time leak that feels harmless. Maybe it's group chats, news cycles, or quick games. Now calculate its true cost. 30 minutes daily equals nearly 8 full days a year. That's 8 sunrises you could have spent writing a book, 8 evenings mastering a skill, 8 opportunities to connect with someone who shapes your journey. The urgency isn't meant to paralyze, it's meant to activate. Seneca wrote, "Hold every hour in your grasp, lay hold of today's task, and you will not need to depend so much on tomorrow's." Not because tomorrow might not come, but because tomorrow's freedom is won by today's discipline. The entrepreneur who carves out 90 morning minutes for deep work isn't sacrificing leisure, she's buying back her future. So here's the question only you can answer. What triviality will you demote today to elevate what lasts, not with guilt, but with the quiet confidence of someone who's finally stopped renting out their life to distractions and started owning it? Betrayal cuts deeper than most wounds because it comes wrapped in trust, the very thing that makes the slash so unexpected. The Stoics faced treachery with clear eyes and steady hands, treating it not as a personal catastrophe but as a stress test for character. When Julius Caesar's forces closed in on Cato the Younger, even his enemies marveled at his restraint. Rather than cursing those who abandoned his cause, he spent his final hours ensuring his soldiers' safe passage. His last act wasn't vengeance, it was protecting the men who'd switched sides. That's the paradox of Stoic forgiveness. It looks like surrender but operates like steel. Epictetus, who'd been betrayed by his own crippled body long before others could fail him, framed it bluntly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Notice he didn't say, pretend it doesn't hurt. He said, control the reaction. There's a critical distinction between swallowing resentment and transforming it. Picture a master blacksmith handed a flawed ingot. The novice might discard it. The craftsman sees raw material. Betrayal works the same way. It's emotional ore waiting to be forged into wisdom. Try this exercise tonight. Write a letter to someone who wronged you, not to send, but to dissect. Detail the hurt, then ask, what did this teach me about my own boundaries? Where did I ignore red flags? How has this sharpened my discernment? The goal isn't exoneration, but excavation. When Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, he didn't waste energy hating his jailers. Instead, he studied their language and psychology, turning oppressors into unintentional mentors. That letter you're writing, treat it like Mandela's prison journal, a tool to extract strength from what others meant to break you. Forgiveness gets mislabeled as weakness because we confuse it with forgetting. Stoics never advocated erasing memory, they advised recycling pain. The entrepreneur whose partner embezzled funds can still press charges while privately acknowledging, "This taught me to vet character over charisma." A parent estranged by a child's cruel words can grieve while recognizing, "This revealed where my love was conditional." Even the bitterest betrayals carry seeds of reinvention if you're willing to sift through the ashes. Here's the litmus test. When you recall the person who hurt you, does your pulse still race? That's not a sign you haven't forgiven. It's proof the lesson hasn't finished teaching you. Marcus Aurelius faced plots against his throne daily, yet his journal repeats one refrain: "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy, not better than unlike." Because hatred chains you to the very thing you despise, the Stoic path thank your betrayers for the unexpected curriculum. They showed you where you tied your worth to unreliable people. They exposed gaps in your discernment. They handed you the chisel to sculpt a version of yourself that no future betrayal can shake. So take that unsent letter and add a final line: "I'm returning what you gave me, not as a wound, but as a compass." Then light a match. Let the flames do what time alone can't: transform dead weight into light. Seneca watched Rome's elite choke on their own excess. Silver couches weighing down their villas, armies of servants complicating every meal, and distilled their predicament into 5 words: "Wealth is the slave of the wise." Not a possession, not a status symbol, a tool, one that either serves your purpose or becomes your purpose by default. Picture a traveler dragging an overstuffed suitcase through an airport. The more he packs just in case, the slower he moves. That's the paradox of accumulation. We think we're securing comfort, but we're mortgaging our agility. Stoic minimalism isn't about empty rooms or hair shirts. It's about auditing your life with the precision of a sculptor, chiseling away everything that isn't essential to the masterpiece beneath. Take the modern executive whose calendar looks like a battlefield: back-to-back meetings, networking dinners, side projects. Each commitment seems productive alone, but together they form a cage. Contrast that with the entrepreneur who guards her mornings like a vault, reserving them for deep work that actually moves the needle. She's not doing less, she's accomplishing more by removing the friction between her and what matters. That's the Stoic edge, subtracting to multiply. Now try this audit. Walk through your home and pick up one object you haven't used in 6 months. A gadget still in its packaging, a jacket hanging unworn, a book bought but unread. Hold it and ask, does this expand my freedom or my footprint? The answer isn't always obvious. That espresso machine gathering dust might represent abandoned aspirations of home barista skills, or it might just be clutter. The Stoic question isn't, can I afford to keep this, but what could I afford to do if I let it go? History's most enduring figures mastered this art. When Alexander the Great met the philosopher Diogenes lounging in his barrel, he famously said, "Ask anything of me." Diogenes replied, "Stand aside, you're blocking my sun." That wasn't a punchline, it was a masterclass in priority. The man who conquered empires couldn't comprehend someone who'd conquered need. Your turn. Identify one commitment, possession, or habit that demands more from you than it gives back. Maybe it's the premium cable package that feeds binge watching instead of rest, the gym membership that guilts more than it motivates, or the committee seat that drains time without deepening purpose. Now apply Seneca's razor. If this vanished tomorrow, what would I genuinely miss, not theoretically, viscerally? The gap between those answers reveals where you've been confusing motion with meaning. Because here's the secret Rome's excess-fatigued citizens missed. Minimalism isn't deprivation, it's disproportionate leverage. The fewer anchors you drag, the faster you sail toward what outlasts you. The Stoics never saw wisdom as a solitary pursuit. It was always a shared fire meant to warm more than one soul. Hierocles, the Greek philosopher, captured this beautifully with his concept of concentric circles. Imagine your life as a series of expanding rings, starting with your own mind at the center, then radiating outward to family, friends, community, and eventually all of humanity. Each circle represents a layer of connection where Stoic virtues come alive, not in isolation, but in action. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee," he wasn't just musing, he was laying bare a fundamental truth. Your legacy isn't measured by what you accumulate for yourself, but by what you contribute to the collective. Modern life often mistakes independence for strength. We celebrate the lone wolf, the self-made myth, the grind culture that treats relationships as distractions. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. A wolf separated from its pack starves, no matter how strong its jaws. The irony, in an age of hyper-connectivity, genuine community has never felt scarcer. Social media gives us 500 contacts but 5 real conversations. We mistake likes for listening, emojis for empathy. Contrast that with Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, who taught his students in the painted Stoa of Athens, not behind closed doors, but in a public colonnade where anyone could join. Philosophy wasn't a private hobby, it was street-level medicine for the soul. Here's the challenge lurking beneath hierarchical circles: proximity doesn't equal connection. You can sit in a crowded office or sleep next to a partner every night and still be relationally malnourished. The Roman Stoics practiced something radical for their time: active citizenship. Not just paying taxes or voting, but mentoring younger colleagues, reconciling feuding neighbors, funding schools. They understood that virtue withers without engagement. Think of a modern professional who volunteers to train interns instead of hoarding knowledge, or a neighbor who organizes block parties to combat urban isolation. These aren't soft acts of charity, they're the hard work of weaving social fabric that outlasts them. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, still wrote, "Men exist for the sake of one another." Not to use, but to uplift. That's the Stoic twist on community. It's not about networking for personal gain, but about recognizing that your growth and others' growth are entwined. When a farmer tends his orchard, he doesn't accuse the trees of taking his time. He knows the fruit will feed them both. So this week, pick one relationship, not the easiest one, but the one that's frayed or neglected, and reinvest in it. Have the uncomfortable conversation. Offer help without being asked. Listen not to reply, but to understand, because legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's who you helped others become along the way. Seneca called anger a brief madness, a fire that burns brightest but leaves only ash. Yet history's most transformative figures didn't extinguish that fire, they harnessed its heat. Consider Martin Luther King Jr. facing down police dogs and fire hoses in Birmingham. The injustice could have justified rage, but his training in Stoic principles and Gandhi's nonviolence turned fury into focused action. Every clenched fist became an open hand reaching across divides. Every brutal arrest became a strategic lever for change. That's the Stoic alchemy of anger, not denying its energy but refining its purpose. The Roman philosopher's treatise on anger reads like a manual for modern activism. Anger, he wrote, is like falling onto a sword to strike an enemy. The initial pain is yours alone, but channeled through discipline, it becomes a scalpel for dissection rather than a sledgehammer for destruction. Picture a nurse in an understaffed hospital. The exhaustion from double shifts could erupt into bitter complaints, or it could fuel a meticulously researched campaign for policy reform. The difference isn't in the frustration, it's in the craftsmanship of response. Here's where most misinterpret Stoic restraint. Seneca wasn't advocating passivity, he was teaching precision. When your coworker takes credit for your idea, the immature reaction is a public confrontation. The Stoic response: document your contributions quietly, then request a meeting to clarify roles, not to shame but to realign. Ancient Rome had its own version of office politics, and Seneca's advice cuts through centuries. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Not suppression, strategic pause. Give the adrenaline time to metabolize into clarity. Try this reframe today. Identify one injustice that makes your pulse quicken: a biased policy at work, a neglected issue in your community. Now apply Seneca's 3 filters. First, perspective. Is this truly within my control to change? Second, preparation. What facts, allies, or skills would make my intervention effective rather than just emotional? Third, purpose. Will this action repair harm or merely vent my spleen? The civil rights leader John Lewis called this good trouble, the kind that's calculated to heal rather than hurt. History's true reformers share a pattern. They transformed personal outrage into communal uplift. The suffragettes didn't just smash windows, they built schools to teach marginalized women to vote. Twitter activists today who actually shift narratives do more than rant. They archive receipts, draft legislation, mobilize voters. Anger becomes legacy not when it's loudest, but when it's leveraged. So tonight, pick up a notebook and answer this. What systemic itch have you been scratching in private? Now design one action that scratches it for everyone. Maybe it's mentoring someone who faces the barriers you once did, or converting bitter dinner table debates into letters to local representatives. Stoicism's brilliance lies in its practicality. Your fury isn't a weakness, it's potential energy. The question isn't whether you'll spend it, but how. Epictetus sliced through procrastination with surgeon-like precision. You are living now, not later, not eventually, not when conditions are perfect. Now, that simple truth exposes someday as the most seductive lie we tell ourselves. Picture a hospice nurse interviewing dying patients about their deepest regrets. The most common refrain wasn't, "I wish I'd worked harder," or "I should have bought more things." It was, "I wish I'd had the courage to live true to myself, not the life others expected of me." Those words hang in the air like smoke long after the fire's gone out. What dreams are you postponing while waiting for some mythical finish line? The Stoics recognized a brutal truth about human psychology. We treat time like an endless resource while behaving as if our desires have expiration dates. Seneca observed how people save their finest wine for special occasions that never come, only to find the bottle has turned to vinegar. That metaphor cuts deeper today than ever. How many of us are hoarding our best efforts, saving our boldest moves for some undefined future where the stars align perfectly? The entrepreneur delaying his startup until he has enough savings. The artist stashing her portfolio until she feels ready. The parent putting off that meaningful trip until the kids are older. These aren't plans, they're elegantly disguised surrenders. Marcus Aurelius confronted this illusion daily in his meditations. Stop letting your emotions override what your mind tells you. Stop letting the present moment sabotage the rest of your life. Notice he didn't say eliminate emotions, he said don't let them hijack your agency. Procrastination isn't a time management problem, it's a fear management issue. When you delay writing that book, you're not avoiding the typing, you're avoiding the vulnerability of putting your ideas into the world. Postponing the difficult conversation isn't about scheduling, it's about the temporary relief of dodging potential conflict. Here's the Stoic antidote: pick one postponed dream, just one, and execute a single concrete action toward it before sunset. Not planning, not researching. Acting. If you've been putting off learning guitar, don't bookmark lessons. Strum one chord repeatedly until your fingers protest. If you dream of writing, abandon the outline and vomit 3 messy paragraphs onto the page. The goal isn't perfection, it's breaking the seal on someday. Ancient athletes training for the Olympics didn't wait for ideal conditions, they trained barefoot in the snow if necessary. Their philosophy, better a clumsy start than a flawless fantasy. History's most enduring legacies share this thread. They began as imperfect actions, not perfect plans. Van Gogh sold 1 painting in his lifetime, yet produced over 2,000 works. Mozart composed his first symphony at 8 years old. It wasn't genius, but it was motion. The common denominator isn't talent or timing. It's the refusal to let ready be a prerequisite for starting. Your someday is a thief, and every sunrise you let it whisper, "Not yet," is another day it steals from who you could become. So answer Epictetus' challenge, not tomorrow, not after this video, right now. What one thing have you been treating as optional that your future self will consider essential? The gap between those answers is where your legacy begins. Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn not because he was a masochist, but because he understood something profound. The first hour of the day is the lever that moves the world. While Rome slept, he'd light a lamp and write in his journal not to-do lists or wishful thinking, but brutal self-interrogations. What evil have I cured today? What weakness have I resisted? This wasn't journaling, it was mental metallurgy, forging his resolve before the world could dent it. Fast forward 2,000 years, and modern mornings look more like triage than ritual. Snoozed alarms, frantic scrolls through overnight emails, sugar-laced breakfast shoveled down while standing. The chaos isn't accidental, it's the exact opposite of Stoic intention. Consider two neighbors waking at the same hour. One grabs his phone immediately, flooding his cortex with news alerts and social comparisons before his feet hit the floor. The other sits silently for 10 minutes, visualizing the day's challenges like a general surveying a battlefield. By noon, their biochemical states diverge wildly. One is already on his third cortisol spike, the other moves with the deliberate calm of a deep-sea diver. Both had identical time, but only one used it. The Stoic morning ritual hinges on what psychologists now call priming, setting the emotional and cognitive tone before external demands hijack it. Seneca practiced lucubratio, pre-dawn study sessions where he'd wrestle with philosophical texts while his household slept. Epictetus trained his students to greet sunrise with ascesis, deliberate discomfort like cold water or strenuous exercise, not to punish themselves but to inoculate against the day's inevitable friction. Modern science confirms their intuition. Willpower is highest upon waking, making mornings the ideal time to imprint habits that compound over decades. So here's the challenge hiding in Marcus's question. What 20-minute practice would anchor you? Not another productivity hack, but a keystone ritual that makes everything else easier. For the entrepreneur drowning in decision fatigue, it might be reviewing her core values before checking devices. For the parent perpetually rushed, 5 minutes of stillness with tea, mentally rehearsing patience before the kids wake. The key isn't the activity itself, but its intentionality, creating a buffer between reactivity and response. Think of your mind as a pond. Modern mornings are like throwing rocks into it before the sediment settles. Stoic mornings wait for the water to clear so you can see your reflection and the path ahead without distortion. That's why Marcus wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." Not as hallmark sentiment, but as tactical reminder, dawn is your daily resurrection. Waste it, and you've surrendered your edge before the race begins. Your move tonight: place your phone outside the bedroom. Tomorrow, when the alarm sounds, stay horizontal for 60 seconds. Ask yourself, what quality do I want to define today? Then, before screens or voices intrude, spend 20 minutes courting that version of yourself, through ink on paper, movement, or pure unfiltered thought. The Romans didn't own mornings because they were more disciplined. They owned their days because they refused to let mornings own them. Seneca stood in marble halls dripping with gold, surrounded by Nero's courtiers laughing at cruel jokes, and said no. Not with grand defiance, but with quiet resolve. When the emperor demanded his presence at drunken orgies, Seneca pleaded illness. When asked to draft speeches justifying executions, he lost his eloquence. Each refusal chipped away at his safety, yet preserved something far more vital: his integrity. That's the paradox of boundary setting. The Stoics mastered what looks like surrender. Stepping back, declining, walking away is actually the only way to hold the line on what matters. Your legacy isn't built on what you accept, but on what you reject. Fast forward to a modern boardroom where a tech founder is pressured to sell user data for a 9-figure profit. The room buzzes with rationalizations. Everyone does it. We'll anonymize the data. It's just business. The Stoic move, not necessarily slamming the table, though sometimes that's required, but asking one question: does this align with the company we claimed to be when we started? That's Seneca's legacy in action, recognizing that no isn't just a word, it's a chisel sculpting your character. The moment you trade principles for profit, you're not making a deal, you're becoming someone who makes those deals. Here's where most stumble. We confuse busyness with purpose. Say yes to every favor, every committee, every quick coffee that hijacks your focus, and soon your calendar resembles a bomb site, full of debris, devoid of direction. Epictetus saw this coming. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. In other words, let them think you're rude for guarding your time. The investor who turns down a lucrative but misaligned partnership isn't losing money. She's buying back her freedom to chase what truly matters. Now the real test: scan your commitments like a Stoic auditor. That non-profit board you joined out of guilt, the side project that drained your evenings without deepening your craft, even the friendships that leave you emptier than they fill you. Circle 1, not to complain but to release. Seneca didn't just refuse Nero's corruption, he systematically pared back his own life, writing, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." Every no to distraction is a yes to destiny. So tonight, rehearse your refusal before you need it. When the next shiny opportunity comes wrapped in compromise, you won't need courage, you'll have a precedent. Like Seneca, you'll know some invitations aren't opportunities, they're litmus tests for who you're becoming. Decline as if your future self is watching. Because they are. Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover everything you take for granted has vanished. Your sight, your morning coffee, the hum of your refrigerator. The Stoics called this Premeditatio Malorum, not to dwell on loss, but to sharpen your gratitude for what's already here. While modern culture trains us to crave the next upgrade, the next milestone, the Stoics practiced something radical, loving the ordinary as if it were already enough. Epictetus, born into slavery, framed it with piercing clarity. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. That's not resignation, it's liberation. Consider how entitlement hijacks happiness. A delayed flight sparks outrage, a lukewarm meal feels like betrayal, a cracked phone screen ruins the afternoon. Contrast that with the Roman philosopher Musonius Rufus, who celebrated stale bread as a chance to strengthen his resilience, or the modern astronaut who returns from space marveling at Earth's fragility, not because he lacked comforts aboard the spacecraft, but because distance revealed what's truly rare: breathable air, liquid water, the miracle of gravity. Gratitude isn't passive acceptance, it's the lens that turns mundane details into revelations. Here's the practice that transforms theory into muscle memory. Tonight, list 3 blessings you've overlooked this week. Not the obvious ones: family, health, shelter, but the invisible infrastructure of your life, the click of a working lighter, the silence between alarms when you wake naturally. The way your favorite shirt still smells like detergent after years of wear. This isn't just mindfulness, it's anti-entitlement training. Every time you pause to appreciate functional Wi-Fi or a stranger's smile, you're depositing resilience against future frustrations. History's most contented figures share this trait. They treated gratitude as a daily discipline, not a seasonal sentiment. When Marcus Aurelius penned his midnight meditations, he didn't rhapsodize about imperial palaces. He noted the warmth of his blanket, the loyalty of his teachers, even the mischief of his children. These weren't platitudes, they were tactical reminders that joy thrives in the soil of attention. Modern research confirms this. Soldiers who journaled daily gratitudes during deployments, SHOWED, Chinese letter, higher resilience than peers who didn't. Now the counterintuitive twist: negative visualization doesn't diminish ambition, it fuels it. The entrepreneur who pauses to appreciate her ramen-fueled startup days isn't romanticizing struggle, she's inoculating herself against future discontent. Success tastes sweeter when you remember the flavor of scarcity. Epictetus knew this when he advised, whenever you grow attached to something, rehearse in your mind what it would be like to lose it. Not to breed fear, but to deepen your grip on the present. So try this tonight. As you lock your door, pause. Really feel the safety of that deadbolt. When your shower water turns hot, let the steam remind you that most humans across history bathed in rivers or not at all. These micro moments of awareness are the stitches weaving a life not just of achievement but of astonishment. Because the greatest wealth isn't having more, it's needing less while loving what you already own. An oak tree doesn't apologize for taking 100 years to mature. It understands something most of us forget. Greatness unfolds at the speed of roots, not reactions. While saplings race toward the sun, the oak invests silently underground, weaving a network strong enough to outlast storms. That's the Stoic view of legacy in motion, not a sprint for quick validation, but a lifelong excavation of depth. Consider the scientist Rosalind Franklin, whose X-ray images of DNA were overshadowed in her lifetime, only to become the uncredited foundation of Watson and Crick's Nobel Prize. She didn't live to see her work change biology forever, but her meticulous patience built a lattice others climbed to reach the future. Marcus Aurelius whispered this truth to himself at war: never let the future disturb you. You will meet it with the same weapons of reason and mind you now wield against the present. Notice he didn't say ignore the future, he said arm yourself for it. Every journal entry he scratched by lamplight, every unjust insult swallowed with grace, was a seed planted for a harvest he might never see. Modern culture obsesses over quarterly results and overnight virality, but the Stoics measured in decades. The Roman aqueducts didn't spring up in a season, they were laid stone by engineers who knew their grandchildren would drink from fountains they'd never touch. Now pivot to your own life. That skill you've been meaning to master, the book draft collecting dust, the strained relationship you keep postponing to mend. What if you approach them not as tasks to finish, but as acorns to bury? Not for the applause at the planting, but for the shade they'll cast long after you're gone. The composer Johann Sebastian Bach wrote his ethereal cello suites not for fame. He was barely recognized in his era, but because the music demanded to exist. Centuries later, astronauts would play his melodies aboard the Voyager spacecraft, carrying his legacy beyond Earth's atmosphere. Here's the challenge hiding in Marcus's words: legacy isn't about changing the world today. It's about changing what the world becomes by the ripples you set in motion now. The teacher who stays late to explain algebra one more time may never meet the scientist her student becomes. The father who models integrity during bankruptcy won't see how his children replicate that strength in their own crises. But the tree doesn't witness the forest it seeds, it simply grows as if the future depends on it. Because it does, so grab your shovel, not the metaphorical one, the real one. What tiny, unglamorous act can you commit to today that won't bloom for years? Maybe it's finally starting that research, not with a finished thesis in mind, but with the curiosity of someone planting an orchard they may never harvest. Or choosing patience in a conflict, not because it solves anything immediately, but because you're rehearsing the kind of ancestor you want to be remembered as. The oak's secret isn't longevity, It's the audacity to sink roots into soil it won't live to see flourish. Your legacy works the same way. The best time to plant was 20 years ago. The second best time is now, with dirt under your nails and your eyes on a horizon you'll never reach. Seneca's warning cuts through centuries like a cold wind. No man is happy. Not because happiness is impossible, but because the moment you declare yourself a master, you stop becoming one. The fall of every self-proclaimed genius follows the same arc. Complacency replaces curiosity, certainty smothers growth, and the pedestal they built becomes their prison. Take the tech billionaire who once revolutionized an industry, only to spiral into obscurity after dismissing younger innovators as naive. His mistake wasn't failure, it was forgetting that mastery isn't a throne to sit on, but a mountain with no summit. Humility isn't self-deprecation, it's the conscious act of leaving room for surprise. Imagine a concert violinist who's performed for decades. The night she stops feeling her stomach flutter before stepping on stage is the night her art begins to decay. That tension isn't fear, it's the acknowledgement that no matter how many encores she's played, tonight's performance could humble her. The Stoics called this docilitas teachability. Not empty modesty, but the raw awareness that every skill you possess is borrowed from those who came before, and every mistake you've avoided was revealed by someone else's fall. History's most enduring innovators shared this trait. When Marie Curie won her second Nobel Prize, she didn't host lavish celebrations. She returned to her lab the next morning, scribbling notes about the errors in her own research. Centuries earlier, Seneca wrote letters confessing his philosophical blind spots to Lucilius, a junior statesman. These weren't displays of weakness, they were acts of defiance against the creeping lie that expertise immunizes you from error. Here's your challenge. Pick one skill or knowledge area where you consider yourself competent. Maybe it's public speaking, parenting, or coding. Now interrogate it like a prosecutor. When did you last seek feedback instead of waiting to give it? How recently have you revisited fundamentals instead of skating on familiarity? The entrepreneur who audits his pitch after every rejection isn't doubting himself, he's ensuring his edges stay sharp. The fallen celebrity clutching yesterday's headlines is a cautionary tale, but the lesson isn't about avoiding failure, it's about avoiding the belief that you're immune to it. Seneca's words echo, "He who thinks he has won has already lost." True mastery isn't stamped by certificates or applause, it's measured by your willingness to kneel before the next lesson. So ask yourself, what have you stopped questioning because it feels settled? That's where your next breakthrough is hiding, in the humility to admit you might not know it as well as you think. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic philosopher who taught Epictetus, cut through society's illusions about wealth with one razor-sharp observation. Frugality is the foundation of self-sufficiency. Notice he didn't say poverty or deprivation, he said frugality, the intentional space between need and excess. The billionaire tossing in silk sheets, obsessing over competitors' net worth, and the monk sleeping soundly on a thin mat share the same moon outside their windows. Only one of them owns the night. That's the Stoic paradox. Real wealth isn't measured by what fills your accounts, but by what no longer fills your thoughts. Take the modern entrepreneur who upgrades his car every year to Project Success, only to find each new model brings fleeting satisfaction followed by fresh anxiety about scratches, loans, or the neighbor's slightly newer model. Contrast that with the artist who rides a decades-old bicycle, not because she can't afford better, but because her mind is too occupied creating to notice what's parked outside. The Stoics recognized this centuries before behavioral economics confirmed it. Luxury doesn't satisfy desire, it rewires it to crave more. Seneca, one of Rome's richest men, slept on a hard bed and ate simple meals not to punish himself, but to remind his body that comfort was optional. a practice modern ultra-successful figures from Jeff Bezos to Tim Ferriss still emulate with their discomfort training. Here's the litmus test hiding in Musonius' words: wealth isn't about having resources, it's about reducing needs. The tech founder grinding 80-hour weeks for a third vacation home might scoff at the barrister who finds joy in library books and park walks, but which of them truly controls their time? Ancient Stoics distinguished between prosperity, external assets, and eudaimonia, flourishing, knowing the first could be stolen by emperors or pirates, while the second was fireproof. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus returned victorious from Carthage, he shocked the Senate by refusing lavish rewards, saying, "The more I possess, the more I have to lose." His wealth wasn't in his vaults, it was in his ability to walk away from them. Try this audit today. Open your banking app and scan last month's transactions. Circle every expense that bought convenience but eroded capability. The meal deliveries that replaced cooking skills, the subscriptions that numb rather than nourish, the status symbols purchased to impress people whose opinions you'd never seek. Now ask, if I have this spending, what would I gain in return? Time, health, freedom from comparison. The answer isn't about dollar amounts, it's about opportunity cost. Every dollar spent pacifying discomfort is a dollar not invested in mastering it. The irony: those who chase money as a proxy for security often become its most anxious servants. Vanderbilt died whispering, "The care of millions is too great." On his deathbed, Rockefeller, once the world's richest man, confessed, "I have made many millions, but they have brought me no happiness." Contrast that with Epictetus, who lived with just a wooden bowl until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands, then threw even that away, realizing, "I didn't know how little one truly needs." His poverty wasn't imposed, it was chosen, a declaration that his peace couldn't be shattered by loss. So tonight, as you lock your door, pause. That roof overhead, the meal digesting in your stomach, the quiet safety of the hour, these are luxuries most humans across history never knew. The Stoic twist: gratitude isn't just good manners, it's an accounting method that reveals you're richer than you think. Wealth isn't about adding to your pile, it's about subtracting from your worries until all that's left is the unshakable understanding that you already have enough, and therefore you are enough. Seneca's exile to Corsica should have broken him banished to a barren island, stripped of status, left to rot far from Rome's glittering halls. Instead, it became the forge where his greatest works were hammered into being. While others saw a punishment, Seneca glimpsed liberation, a chance to write without distraction, to refine his philosophy in solitude, to prove that no external condition could dictate his worth. His letters from exile didn't plead for mercy, they radiated gratitude for the space to think deeply. That's the alchemy of wisdom, the ability to hold failure up to the light and see not just the cracks, but the way the light pours through them. Now fast forward to Silicon Valley, where a founder watches her startup crumble after a failed product launch. Investors flee, headlines mock, and the industry writes her off as a cautionary tale. But in the rubble of that collapse, she spots something unexpected. The flawed assumption that doomed her venture also reveals a gap in the market. 2 years later, she relaunches with a leaner model, sharper focus, and humility forged in failure. Her comeback isn't just a business rebound, it's a living testament to Seneca's insight. Difficulty shows what men are, not by breaking them, but by revealing what they're made of. Here's where most misunderstand failure's role in legacy. We treat it like a stain to hide or a wound to lick, when really, it's the one teacher who never softens the lesson. Consider the chef who burns his signature dish at a critical review. He could blame the oven, the ingredients, the critic's palate, or he could dissect that charred mess like a forensic scientist, uncovering the exact moment the heat was too high, the sauce too reduced. That's Stoic analysis in action, not "why did this happen to me," but "what is this trying to show me?" So tonight, dust off one old failure you've kept buried. not to relive the pain but to mine it for gold. That rejected manuscript, it taught you pacing. The collapsed partnership, it revealed your blind spots around trust. Even the humiliating presentation that still makes you cringe. It was the baptism by fire that hardened your ability to think on your feet. Wisdom doesn't whisper in triumphs, it shouts through stumbles. Seneca's Exile birthed letters that outlived empires. Your worst moment might just hold the seed of your best work, if you're brave enough to plant it. Epictetus warned his students to guard the gates of their minds like a fortress under siege, because every unchecked impression that slips through becomes a silent ruler of your attention. 2,000 years later, that siege isn't carried out by barbarians at the city walls, but by blinking notifications, auto-playing reels, and algorithms designed to fracture focus into 1,000 scattered shards. The average person now checks their phone 96 times a day, not because they choose to, but because their attention has been conditioned to flinch like a lab rat pressing a lever for pellets. Stoicism's ancient antidote to this modern plague isn't willpower. It's the disciplined art of deciding what deserves your gaze in the first place. Think of your attention as a spotlight in a darkened theater. Most of us hand the control booth to strangers, social media engineers, breaking news alerts, even well-meaning colleagues dumping last-minute, urgent tasks into our laps. The Stoic approach wrests back the spotlight. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you seek tranquility, do less," he wasn't advocating laziness, he was prescribing ruthless selectivity. Not doing more things poorly, but fewer things with absolute presence. Picture a heart surgeon mid-operation pausing to scroll through memes. Absurd, right? Yet we routinely fracture our focus on work that shapes careers, relationships that nurture souls, and passions that define legacies. Here's the hidden cost of digital distraction most miss. It's not just stolen time, it's eroded depth. A study at the University of California found it takes 23 minutes to fully regain focus after a single interruption. Now multiply that by the 56 daily interruptions the average office worker endures. The math is chilling. We're sacrificing whole hours of potential mastery to the false god of multitasking. The Stoics called this prosach, the discipline of sustained attention. Not as a productivity hack, but as a moral imperative. How can you live virtuously if you're too scattered to notice what virtue requires in any given moment? Try today's challenge like a Stoic gladiator stepping into the arena. Single task for one uninterrupted hour, not just any hour, the one that matters most. For the writer, that means drafting with the internet disabled. For the parent, it's leaving the phone in another room during bedtime stories. The rules are simple but non-negotiable. No switching tabs, no, just quick checks. No surrendering to the itch of curiosity. At first, your mind will rebel like a caged animal. That's not failure, it's withdrawal from addiction. By minute 45, something magical happens. The mental static fades, and you'll discover focus isn't something you lose, it's something you uncover beneath layers of conditioned distraction. Epictetus offered a litmus test for impressions. Does this concern what's within my control? Apply that to your notifications. That email alert, it can wait. The trending hashtag, irrelevant to your craft. Even the important news cycle, how many headlines from 6 months ago can you recall? Contrast that with the hour you spent mastering a skill or connecting deeply with a loved one. Those are the moments that compound into legacy. The ironclad law of attention is this: where your gaze rests, your life follows. A pianist doesn't become virtuosic by practicing in 30-second bursts between TikTok clips. A marriage doesn't thrive on fragmented moments between screen checks. So tonight, conduct an autopsy of your attention. Which apps have hijacked your reflexes? What trivialities have you mistaken for urgency? The answers aren't indictments, they're the blueprint for reclaiming what's been stolen. Because the most radical act of focus in a distracted age isn't just productivity, it's sovereignty over your own mind. Epictetus never built a school. He taught in the open courtyard of a modest home in Nicopolis, where anyone could wander in and sit on the rough wooden benches. His most devoted student, Aurelius, didn't just take notes. He preserved his teacher's words so faithfully that 2,000 years later, we still hear the echo of that raspy voice asking, "How long will you wait before you demand the best of yourself?" That's the Stoic view of mentorship, not a transfer of information, but the passing of a torch that illuminates paths long after the original flame is gone. Consider a modern parallel: the high school basketball coach who stays late every afternoon drilling fundamentals into restless teenagers. 20 years later, one of those players, now a CEO, credits her success to the relentless repetition of free throws under flickering gym lights. "He didn't just teach me to shoot," she reflects. "He taught me that mastery lies in the gaps, the extra 10 minutes when no one's watching." That's the alchemy of true guidance. The lessons outlast the moment, woven into the fabric of how someone moves through the world. The Stoics didn't see teaching as a separate vocation. It was the natural harvest of wisdom. Seneca wrote letters to Lucilius not because he sought fame, but because he understood that knowledge stagnates when hoarded. Like a river that grows clearer as it flows, insight deepens when shared. When Musonius Rufus taught philosophy while exiled to a barren island, his students didn't just learn ethics. They witnessed them embodied in a man who refused to let harsh conditions harden his heart. Mentorship isn't about polished lectures, it's about letting others see how you weather storms. Here's where the modern world misses the mark. We've professionalized mentorship into formal programs and scheduled coffee chats, stripping away the raw, accidental beauty of influence. The barrister who casually mentions a life-changing book to a regular customer, the nurse who shows a new intern how to deliver bad news with dignity, these are Stoic teachers in disguise. Epictetus would nod in recognition. The deepest lessons often come unannounced, wrapped in everyday moments. So today, ask yourself, who's standing at the edge of your orbit, waiting for a signal that they belong? Not just the promising protege at work, but the neighbor's kid struggling with confidence, the junior colleague whose rough edges remind you of your younger self. Stoic mentorship doesn't require a podium, just the willingness to say, "I've been there, here's what the fall taught me." Legacy isn't just what you build, it's who you help rise after you've climbed. And sometimes the most enduring monuments aren't made of stone, but of the quiet words that whisper, "Try again, this time like this." Seneca's letters reveal a counterintuitive truth. Control isn't about steering the ship, it's about adjusting the sails. "Fate leads the willing," he wrote, "and drags the resisting." Picture a surfer reading the ocean's mood. She doesn't waste energy cursing waves for their size or direction. She studies their rhythm, positions herself where their power converges, and lets their momentum become her own. The water doesn't obey her, yet she dances across its surface with breathtaking precision. That's the paradox of control. Mastery lies not in commanding the elements, but in harmonizing with them. Now shift this lens to your own life. That sudden job transfer you fought tooth and nail, what if it's the current pulling you toward uncharted skills? The relationship that ended despite your desperate grip, could it be the tide receding to reveal firmer ground? Resistance often masquerades as vigilance. We white-knuckle plans forged in calmer seasons, mistaking rigidity for determination. But the Stoic surfer knows no wave, no matter how perfectly ridden, lasts forever. The skill is in the pivot, not the pause. Consider the tech CEO who spent years resisting remote work, insisting on office walls and face-to-face meetings. When the pandemic erased that illusion, she had a choice: lament the loss or redesign her company's culture around distributed talent. By embracing the shift, she unlocked global hiring pools and slashed overhead gains she'd never have stumbled upon without the storm. Seneca would nod in recognition. The fiercest winds often blow us to shores we'd never have charted. Here's the practice hidden in the paradox. When friction arises, ask, what's this trying to move me toward? Not in a vague spiritual sense, but with tactical curiosity. The delayed flight becomes time to refine your pitch. The missed promotion prompts an audit of your true strengths. Even the traffic jam that steals an hour can be reclaimed as a podcast-fueled masterclass. The waves keep coming either way. Your choice is whether to fight their weight or let them propel you. Epictetus, who knew the lash of a cruel master's whip, framed it bluntly. Don't demand that events happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you'll go on well. That's not passive surrender, it's the art of spotting openings where others see obstacles. The surfer doesn't conquer the wave, she partners with it. Your frustrations, they're not barriers, they're the very forces waiting to carry you forward, if you'd only loosen your grip and lean into their curve. Seneca ended his days with a ritual more revealing than any diary. He'd sit by dim lamplight and interrogate himself like a stern but loving mentor. What evils did I cure today? Where did I indulge weakness? What debts of kindness remain unpaid? This wasn't self-punishment, it was a surgeon's nightly rounds for the soul. Imagine a blacksmith examining his tools after forging a blade, checking for nicks, straightening warped edges, ensuring tomorrow's work begins with precision. That's the power of the Stoic daily review, not just recounting events but refining the instrument behind them. Modern life races toward bedtime with exhaustion as the only metric. We collapse into sheets, vaguely recalling meetings and meals, then wonder why growth feels elusive. Contrast that with the Roman general Scipio Africanus, who reportedly replayed every decision from his campaigns each night, not just tactical moves, but the moral weight behind them. Did that flanking maneuver serve strategy or pride? Was mercy shown to that village truly compassionate or politically calculated? The questions weren't about outcomes, they were about alignment. Here's how to make this ancient practice shockingly practical tonight. Grab any notebook, no fancy journal required, and divide a page into 3 columns. First, virtues in action. Note moments where courage, temperance, or wisdom surfaced. Maybe you paused before reacting to a provocation, self-control, or admitted a mistake instead of covering it, integrity. Second, missed opportunities. Where did comfort override character? That time you nodded along to gossip instead of redirecting the conversation. The third column is the game changer, course correction. For every lapse, draft one tiny redress, not sweeping vows like be better, but specific nudges. Tomorrow, when Sarah vents about Mark, I'll ask, what's your part in this? The brilliance of Seneca's framework lies in its surgical focus. He didn't ask, what did I achieve today, but what evils did I cure, implying that growth isn't about adding accolades but removing obstructions. A vineyard owner doesn't measure progress by grape counts alone, but by the weeds pulled, the pests thwarted, the branches pruned. Your character grows the same way. Now, the twist most miss. This ritual works because it leverages negativity bias the brain's tendency to cling to failures. By examining stumbles on purpose, you drain their emotional charge. That awkward silence when you avoided hard truths, now it's data, not regret. The extra dessert justifying just this once. A clue to hidden stress triggers. Like a chemist studying reactions, you're not judging explosions, you're learning their formulas. Try tonight's audit with radical honesty, not the performative self-flagellation of I'm terrible, but the precise diagnosis of here's where I drifted and here's how to adjust sail. Close as Seneca did, by forgiving yourself for being works in progress, then lighting tomorrow's path with today's hard-won insights. The goal isn't a perfect scorecard, it's the quiet certainty that no day, however messy, passes without leaving you slightly forged anew. Legacy isn't built in dramatic declarations or isolated acts of heroism. It's forged in the quiet, consistent choices that shape who you become when no one's watching. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, courage over comfort, or wisdom over whim, you're not just passing a day, you're etching your mark on eternity. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. They understood that radical change doesn't come from waiting for the perfect moment, but from mastering the ordinary ones. Think of the sculptor who transforms a block of marble not with a single strike, but with thousands of deliberate chips. Your character works the same way. Marcus Aurelius left us a compass for this very journey. The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. That's the Stoic secret distilled. Your external world will always shift, but your inner world, that's yours to shape. Every obstacle you reframe as fuel, every impulse you pause to question, every petty grievance you release, these aren't just personal victories. They're the bricks of a legacy that outlasts you. The entrepreneur who treats a failed product launch as a lesson instead of a defeat isn't just salvaging a business. They're building resilience that will ripple through their team for decades. The parent who models patience during a toddler's meltdown isn't just surviving bedtime, they're laying the foundation for how that child will handle frustration as an adult. But here's where philosophy meets action. This isn't about adopting every Stoic principle at once. It's about picking one today and letting it live through you. Maybe it's the discipline of controlling what you can and releasing what you can't. Perhaps it's the courage to face a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Or maybe it's as simple as pausing before you react, asking, will this matter in a year? The power isn't in the scale of the act, but in the consistency of the practice. A single stone seems insignificant until you realize it's part of a cathedral. So as we close, let Marcus' words linger. The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. The world will keep turning, chaos will keep coming, but your legacy, that's crafted in the space between what happens and how you respond. Choose one principle today. Act on it tomorrow, repeat until it becomes your nature, and if you're ready to go deeper, to transform Stoic wisdom into unshakable daily practice, hit subscribe. The path to radical change doesn't end here, it starts